stories making headlines this hour. The central and Seoul governments officially kick off 2014 at the new administrative city of Sejong with a ceremony video relayed and viewed by 400 public servants based in the capital. A rosy outlook for Korea's trade front. Exports are expected to reach close to $600 billion in 2014. Plus, we delve into North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's New Year's address, from his economic plans for 2014 to an apparent extension of an olive branch to South Korea. These stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Thursday, January 2nd here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you for joining us. We begin this evening in Sejong City, where the government kicked off the new year with its first meeting of 2014.
Our Hwang Ji-hye has more on how the year-old city moved a step closer to becoming the central administrative hub of Korea.
The Korean government held its first meeting of the new year on Thursday in the central city of Sejong. It was the first time the meeting was held in the new administrative city. The meeting led by Prime Minister Chung Hong-won was also broadcast live at the central government complex in Seoul. The government's annual New Year's meeting has been held in Seoul for the past 40 years, but starting this year, it will take place at the government complex in Sejong. Around 600 officials that represent government entities in the new administrative hub took part in the meeting. Prime Minister Chung said the nation's administrative system is at a turning point.
Despite the difficulties we face with the government office relocation plan, we should consider this as a chance to advance the nation's administrative system.
Around 10,000 officials from 31 ministries and state agencies, including the Prime Minister's office and the Finance Ministry, are now working in Sejong following the second phase of a government office relocation plan that wrapped up last December. The new administrative center is the legacy of an election pledge by the late President Roh Moo-hyun in the early 2000s that aims to diminish the focus on the nation's capital and achieve balanced regional development. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
At the nation's top office, President Park Geun-hye has no plans right now to reshuffle her cabinet.
During an emergency news conference on Thursday, Presidential Chief of Staff Kim Ki-chun refuted looming speculation that the president could replace some underperforming ministers in her second year in office, and added that now is an important time to focus on running state affairs. The presidential office reportedly called the presser out of concern that the speculation would create distractions at government ministries at the start of the new year. Political watchers, however, took note of Kim's word choice in the press conference, as he said there were no plans right now for a reshuffle, possibly leaving the door open for one down the line. After heavy political wrangling over the past, characterized by the 2013 National Assembly, politicians are setting their sights on the future June elections.
The stakes are high for all parties. Eric Kim Hyun-ji says they're set to make all-out efforts to win the voters' hearts.
The ruling Saenuri Party is determined to win a landslide victory in the June local elections, in which more than 3,900 local government seats are up for grabs. It plans to harness all party resources and energy for the elections in a bid to empower the Park Geun-hye administration. As the first regional elections under the Park administration, the June elections will serve as an interim evaluation of her presidency.
It's time for us to pull up our collars and approach the public with a humble heart and integrity. We must make 2014 a year that guarantees a bright future for the party.
The stakes are particularly high for the main opposition Democratic Party, which suffered a string of election defeats, starting with the 2012 presidential election. It plans to appeal to voters by accusing the Park administration of worsening the people's livelihoods and the nation's democracy.
In addition to protecting democracy and the people's livelihoods, we need an election victory this brand new year.
The Democratic Party recognizes the need for all-out reform and strengthened internal unity. as it has not only the ruling party to battle, but also a new party led by independent lawmaker An Cheol-soo. An is pushing ahead with plans to form a third party that he says will overcome the old politics of the two-party system. His new party is fast gaining popularity in the southwestern Honam region, which has long been the Democratic Party's traditional power base.
The old system and way of thinking that wants to keep its vested rights by settling for regionalism and refusing to perform itself while talking down on the other must be eradicated starting in the Honam region.
An's new party is sure to split the opposition vote, but An has stressed that he won't merge with others, like he did in the 2012 presidential election when he unsuccessfully joined with the DP to try and get their candidate Moon Jae-in elected president. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
In the wee hours of the new year, the National Assembly passed the 2014 government budget, and it passed on the condition of two other bills involving reforms for the nation's spy agency and foreign investment procedures.
And because the battle over the National Intelligence Service in particular crowded the headlines, tonight we delve into what's exactly in the 2014 government budget with Professor Yang Dun-seok of Catholic University of Korea. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, Professor, this $340 billion government budget is a slight increase from last year, but less than what the government had originally requested. What determined what went into the budget and what did not?
Okay, I think the government is trying very hard to keep President Park's promises, the promise that she made during the elections. So the welfare part of the budget was strengthened quite a bit. The parts dealing with economic recovery, economic aid to so-called creative, innovative firms were also strengthened quite a bit. The education part and the defense part, well, it represents an increase from what they got last year, but still it was less than what those departments asked for. So I think if you had to select some losers, I think those two were the losers for this budget.
I see. So what parts of the budget in particular are in line with President Park and his campaign pledges?
Okay, for job creation, the government announced some mentoring programs for the people who are newly coming into the labor market, individualized aid packages so that they will have better chances of getting jobs, and more flex time and part-time job programs to give more people an opportunity to join at least part of the workforce. And in terms of increased welfare programs, there has been more welfare programs for working parents, parents with especially third children. For example, the third children will get a substantial cut, a substantial aid in university tuition. Also, payments for senior citizens, programs for senior citizens will also be strengthened. There will also be a lot of emphasis on programs for the small and medium-sized companies, especially those small and medium-sized companies which do a lot of R&D. And there will be some assistance for those companies to export abroad as well. There were also some agricultural programs, especially for those agricultural sectors which is going to be hard hit by the free trade agreements. And then on the sort of the opposite side, the government also said that they will step up efforts to collect taxes, to get at tax evaders, as well as close tax loopholes. So they're looking to get a lot of revenues because they really want this budget to be in the surplus if possible. If not, then the deficit to be minimized as much as possible.
Was this budget passed almost originally as written? Was there enough debate that went on in the National Assembly over the budget during the political impasse? Okay,
this budget is very similar to what the government proposed. And part of the reason is that they didn't really have time to debate over the merits of the budget. Now, I think they did add a lot of factors which are politically important. For example, the spending for regional government and regional projects have been increased, partially I think because there's regional elections coming up in June. But still, I just mentioned that this budget was carried out with the assumption that Korean growth will grow by 3.9% per year next year. And, well, most of the civilian or international organizations are predicting somewhere between 3.5 to 3.8%. So it's not a bad estimate. But still, I wish the National Assembly had more time to go over some of these assumptions, go over some of these programs to see actually whether they're realistically formulated.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Yang, for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features restrictions is on the rise. Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on to Mueller, trying to cover up the South's true intentions of maintaining confrontation. Those living in Korea will see bigger utility bills in 2014 as gas prices and postal delivery services are rising in the new year. The move has drawn criticism from some quarters as it will take a heavy toll on the already tight budgets of the nation's low and middle income brackets. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Public utility charges are rising sharply from the start of the new year. With the price of food also on the rise, the price hikes are almost certain to increase the financial burden on households. Following hot on the heels of hikes in electricity and raw material prices, these increases are expected to occur over a wide range of fields. Starting January 1st, the Korea Gas Corporation raised the price of natural gas by roughly 5.8%. The price of gas for households went up by 5.7%, translating into an additional $4 per household per month. The industrial sector saw a 6.1% increase, and the service sector a 5.5% hike. The hike follows a lift in electricity rates in November last year by an average of 5.4% in an attempt to curtail the nation's heavy electricity use. Transportation rates are also set to go up this year. The Korean Railroad Corporation is expected to increase rail prices by about 5%. The city of Ulsan is also considering plans to raise bus fares by 5%, while the western port city of Incheon raised taxi fares by an average of 17% last month. Post office parcel delivery service fees are also slated to rise starting next month. The Korea Post said an additional $1 will be added for packages, while it is also expected to impose transaction fees. The increase is the first in 9 years in a bid to make up for the deficit in postal services due to the reduction in post volume. The price of food and beverages has also gone up. Major confectionery companies, Lotte and Hete, are about to raise prices by an average of 11% and 8.7% respectively. Coca-Cola has also lifted the price of its soft drinks by 6.5%. Some local bakeries will also raise prices on about a third of their products by an average of 7.3% starting January 15th. Considering all the price hikes, it shouldn't come as a huge surprise to see that the Ministry of Strategy and Finance expects this year's inflation rate to be 2.3%, up from last year's 1.3%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The 3 of Korea's nuclear reactors will resume operations soon, further reducing fears that the nation will face a power shortage this winter. After a meeting on Thursday, the Nuclear Safety and Security Commissions approved the resumption of the Shin-Gori Reactors 1 and 2 and Shinwolseong Reactor 1. The 3 have been shut down since May after control cables were found to have been given fake certificates. Now, with newly replaced cables in place and after regular checkups, the 3 reactors are expected to be fully operational by the end of next week. And it looks like we're headed for another bright year on the nation's trade front. Korea's exports are expected to reach close to $600 billion in 2014, backed by steady signs of global economic recovery this year. Arirang News' Chim Young-gil reports.
The future looks rosy for the Korean economy in the new year. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said it expects the export total for this year to reach $595 billion, with imports expected to reach $562 billion. The positive outlook for this year comes after Korea's trade surplus widened to a new high of $44.2 billion in 2013. Exports continue to grow at a steady pace, reaching some $559 billion, the highest in the country's history, while imports dwindled. Strong outbound shipments of mobile phones, home appliances, and semiconductors are expected to drive exports in the coming year, with semiconductors sitting atop the export list. The economic recovery seen in many Western economies is likely to help Korea's exports stay on the upswing in 2014. The Korean automakers are hoping to sell more cars in the U.S. this year as the U.S. economy continues to pick up steam. The shipbuilding industry also expects a positive year, estimating double-digit growth.
Orders for offshore structures are on the rise. If the orders go well, it will boost exports this year.
Korea's steel industry faces a less certain 12 months.
China's steel production capacities have grown rapidly, threatening Korean steelmakers. It has become another China risk factor.
The weak Japanese yen may act as another hurdle to Korea's outbound shipments, but thanks to the international popularity of key product items, Korea's exports may break into new territory yet again this year. Kim Hyung-gil, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un called for better relations with South Korea in his New Year's address, but experts say not to get hopes up too high as similar gestures before provocations have been made before. Our Han Da-eun looks at the possible implications.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un delivered a rather conciliatory message toward South Korea on Wednesday.
We must create an atmosphere to improve ties between the two Koreas. I will work together with anyone who values our people and seeks reunification to improve relations.
Seoul's defense ministry has said it expects more provocative acts from Pyongyang targeting South Korea sometime around March of this year, following the execution of Chang Song-taek, Kim Jong-un's uncle, who was once the North's second most powerful man. Despite the unexpectedly friendly tone of his speech, however, most experts echoed the government's view.
The conciliatory message is not worthy of special attention. North Korea has sent friendly messages in the past before carrying out provocations. I think the New Year's address implies Kim Jong-un's hopes for stability rather than for sincere reconciliation with South Korea.
The North Korean leader also mentioned the execution of Chang Song-taek, although not by name. Referring to his uncle as factionalist filth, he said that removing him has strengthened the ruling Workers' Party. Pundits say mentioning the execution in detail in the New Year's message is a rare move and reflects his still nascent leadership. But they say what really needs to be noted is that Kim put greater emphasis on Pyongyang's ideology education, which calls for blind loyalty to the regime than before.
This shows that Kim Jong-un's leadership has not reached a stable stage yet. The New Year's address in general contains no special messages nor dramatic changes in North Korea's policies.
The experts also note that almost half of Kim Jong-un's 12-page New Year's address conveyed his desire to improve the state's economy. The leader stressed the importance of agriculture and new construction to enhance the standard of living of the North Korean people. Han Da-eun, Arirang News.
The new year may be the time to make amends and bury old hatchets, but following recent high-profile gaffes by Tokyo, it's going to take a lot to convince Korea to rebuild relations with Japan. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
As we begin 2014, bilateral relations between Korea and Japan are on bad footing, largely due to a series of visits to the controversial Yasukuni Shrine in recent days. A member of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet visited the shrine, which honors Japan's war dead and several Class A war criminals, on New Year's Day, less than 1 week after Abe made his own visit. Yoshitaka Shindo, Japan's Internal Affairs and Communications Minister, said he visited the shrine to pay respect to those who lost their lives in war. The Yasukuni Shrine is viewed by Korea and China as a symbol of Japan's wartime aggression. Korean Foreign Ministry spokesperson Cho Tae-young criticized Shindo's move, saying there seems to be a lack of historical awareness among high-profile Japanese political figures. Abe's New Year's address also hit a nerve with Seoul when he called for, quote, building a new Japan, vowing to defend Japanese territory, including its territorial waters and airspace. Japan will mark its annual Takeshima Day on February 22nd, which calls for Korea to return Korea's easternmost islets of Dokdo to Japan. The islets are Korean territory and are under Korean jurisdiction. Abe also suggested the country's pacifist constitution, imposed on Japan after the Second World War, should be amended and called for a more patriotic tone in the country's history textbooks, backing changes to how the Second World War is taught in schools. The Korean government is planning to call for changes to Japan's nationalistic stance by gaining support from the international community. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se is due to visit Washington this month, right before a visit by Shotaro Yachi, a special advisor to Abe's cabinet. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The manager of South Korea's national football team is hard at work preparing his team for the upcoming World Cup in Brazil.
And Stephen Che joins us in the Sports Center with details on the upcoming training camp. Hello there.
Hey guys, manager Hong Myung-bo has put together a grueling training schedule this month and has just released a list of players that will take part in it. Training roster includes 23 players from the K-League and J-League, but not those playing on European clubs. Training camp will open on the 13th over in Brazil, and then the team will head on over to the U.S. a week later for 3 friendly matches against Costa Rica, Mexico, and the USA in that order before returning to Korea February 3rd. Now moving on, sports media outlets have much to say about South Korean baseball players. The MLBNation.com has placed Choo Shin-soo and Ryu Hyun-jin in its top 101 fantasy baseball player rankings for 2014. Meanwhile, MLB.com predicted that the Texas Rangers will reach the World Series on the back of the choo-choo train and Prince Fielder. And sports media outlet Bleacher Report fantasized about top international stars Yoon Seok-min and Lee Dae-ho playing in the majors. Now, the security situation for the Sochi Winter Olympics next month is of growing concern for the International Olympic Committee. And IOC President Thomas Bach addressed the issue in his New Year's message, saying that, quote, terrorism must not triumph, following 2 bombings in Russia earlier this week. Despite that, he expressed trust in the government there to deliver a safe and uninterrupted Olympics for those participating and watching the Games. Let's now jump into Thursday's top matchup, starting with the KBL. The KCC Aegis visited the Mobis Phoebus in Ulsan. Now Mobis comes in looking to lock up the paint, and KCC answers with 3-pointers. It's tied 43-43 at the half. Then Mobis rises in the third. Led by Ham Ji-hoon, 6 players score from the floor. Rod Benson ends with the monster 20 and 18 stat line and powers Mobis to a win, 89-84. Now it's the V-League. The Russian Cash, Vespid, take on the KEPCO Vicstorm in Suwon in their 3rd meeting this season. Now energized by the home fans, KEPCO takes the first set 26-24, but Russian Cash make the bum rush, taking the next 3 25-19, 25-20, and 26-24, and they get the victory and 3 points to overtake KEPCO at 6th in the standings. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
We had high levels of fine dust throughout the country this morning before things cleared up by the afternoon.
But I hear more is on its way tomorrow. For details, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, guys. As you just mentioned, Ji-hye, the central regions are forecast to get 2 to 3 times the normal levels of fine dust tomorrow afternoon. Now, dry weather advisories have also been issued in the southeastern coastal regions. A dry weather alert in Gangwon-do province and a dry weather warning in Gyeongsang-do provinces and the cities of Daegu, Busan, and Ulsan. Taking a look at the current conditions, well, as you can see, we have absolutely clear skies in most parts of the country due to a high pressure system from the West Sea. Now, the good news is that we will continue to have bearable winter weather through next Wednesday, but the news isn't all that rosy because an influenza watch has been issued nationwide, so please pay extra attention to washing your hands and staying healthy. Taking a look at tomorrow's numbers, Seoul starts off the day at -1 degrees with a high of 8. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan hit 12 and 13 degrees respectively. As for other regions, Daejeon reaches 9 degrees while Dokdo and Myeongkimgang peak at 10 and -2 degrees respectively. Well, that's all I have for you this hour, but I'll be back with more updates after midnight.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.